Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP. And I started making a video about this, but then it ended up being a half hour long. So I'm making a video about my life from ages 0 to 6, approximately 5, something like that. I'm doing this because I've seen older INFP insights doing this, and she had a very different childhood than mine, even if she's also an INFP. She grew up in a different place, in a different era. Um, I I realize I've talked a lot about myself on this channel, but I haven't actually done my autobiography. Okay, so I will tie it in a little bit to INFP while I talk. Um, I was born in Sweden. Don't remember that, in Stockholm. When I was 2, I moved down to France and lived there until I was 18. I lived in the same town, and it's a city. It's a big city. I lived in an apartment um, that coincidentally my parents still rent. Okay, um, which is why I became a hoarder, because this thing started accumulating. Okay, things accumulate after like 25 plus years, you know. Um, things start building up. But anyway, I think I had a pretty happy childhood, um, especially as a toddler. But I was very, very anxious. And this is, I don't really have an explanation for this. I guess I was just sensitive. My dad was Swedish, my mom was American. They lived in France. I spoke Swedish to my dad, I spoke American English with my mom. I spoke French at school and in general. And so I learned to speak all 3 of those languages fluently, but it took me a while to learn to speak. It also took me a while to learn to walk. I walked only at 18 months, and when I walked like apparently a whole corridor. Like I just decided to go a whole corridor, and I did it without my parents looking, which is like typical me. You know, I was apparently I was being babysat by some other people, and then I'd walked during that time. Um, and I was a pretty small child growing up. I grew in height late in my like adolescence. So I, uh, I kind of adopted the mentality of a small person, you know, like I can't explain it, but I was used to being cute. Um, and when you're a toddler, you are cute. So, I kind of use that to my advantage. But I went to French schools throughout my whole life. Um, and I did not have a great experience at preschool, kindergarten. I just didn't. But at that time, my grandmother, my mom's mother in the US, got a stroke. And she'd been um, um, what you call a person who sells houses. And so she was really active until she got her stroke. And then she could not work anymore, and she couldn't speak, and she had to relearn to walk and talk. Um, and so my mom would often take me out of school to go to the school in the US. And they would welcome me with open arms. And it was such a much better experience being at that preschool. In French preschool, I would play on my own. I would play on my own, talk to myself. I had a friend who would sometimes come to me, depending on the day. His name was Nicolas. He was a boy. Don't remember much about him. I remember that he had a turquoise fleece shirt often. and that he would sometimes try to drag me out of my own little bubble. But in general, I was playing on my own. Um, at some point, somebody forced me to like go and play with the other girls or that kind of thing. But they would always play mommy, daddy, uh, baby, big sister. And one of those girls, she was an ISFJ. I ended up reconnecting with her because she went to my same high school later on. Um, um, I later on I went to international school, and her parents were Italian, so she knew Italian. But she would always be the mom, she would always be the mom or the big sister. And I would always be forced, like, bossed around by these SJ girls to be the baby or, like not play there. So I'd rather play on my own. So I went and played on my own instead. Um, and I know that a lot of teachers thought that was weird. My teachers said that they thought that I did not speak French at first, so they wrote that down in my evaluation, which is kind of weird. Like, why would you have an evaluation on a preschool kid, But that's how French school worked. It wasn't like trying to encourage your development, it was more like you are a good kid or you're a bad kid. And I was a very, very well behaved good kid. It's just that I was extremely quiet and I never talked. Um, my I developed social anxiety from this basically. Um, my mom, since she was an ENFP, she would often drop me off late to school. She was a stay-at-home mom in general. She did have a little bit of a gig of some sort of with marketing, but she was not like going to an office every day like my dad was. So we had a pretty traditional gender roles in my family. Um, I was an only child until I was 9 and my brother was born. So I got all of that controlling force from my parents, and I didn't want to get into trouble. And I was scared of getting into trouble because then people wouldn't leave me alone and people would yell. And as I mentioned in another video, some kids would get hit by their parents. I did not want to find out if my parents would change their minds on that. I wanted to just be left alone so that I could daydream. I I had this weird. I had this want to be unique. I had this want to be creative, to use my imagination. I did not want to deal with all the controlling behavior that all these adults were showing and all these kids were showing already at that age. So I had this weird relation with authority already then, where I did not want to take a nap at the same time as everybody else, but I would pretend that I was napping so that I wouldn't get into trouble. I would just stare out of the window and like imagine scenarios and stuff. But I didn't want to be there. And I would also come late. I would be stressful because there were all these windows to the classroom, and I remember like everybody staring at me when I would come late to class. Um, so I did not like that. I also did not like that things were so loud. Um, I just did not like that place. The teachers were not happy to be there. They would smoke and they like were ready for retirement. My mom did not like these teachers either because once this teacher like saw my mom help me into a coat, and she yelled at my mom for like not being able to cut the umbilical cord, she said. And my mom was like, I'm just helping her with her like her coat, don't like, you know be a little bit nice. They were really harsh. I just remember being pretty scared of getting into trouble all the time, and so I would be so quiet that like I wanted to disappear and not exist. Um, I was also already then being bullied, even though I didn't really figure it out. Um, I, I we would often get Happy Meals at McDonald's, which were like plastic toys um, that came with the Happy Meal, and one of them was a dinosaur tooth, like with a little explaining book about it. And I think it was a tooth. I don't know if it was a tooth or a claw, but I remember bringing it for show and tell once. It was one of my prized possessions, one of my favorite toys. And nobody took it seriously. But for me, it was like, wow, this is an actual fossil. But it wasn't obviously a fossil, it was just a plastic thing. Um, but I remember that these boys took it from me and started playing like it was a rhinoceros horn. And I was like, give it back. And then they just ran away with it and they never got any accountability. And then that thing was disappeared forever. And I remember being really sad about that. But nobody did anything. No teachers stepped in or anything. Same thing happened to one of My Little Pony unicorn. I thought that this is like the ultimate My Little Pony. I was really into My Little Pony. And the reason why is because I was already obsessed with personality, okay? Already at age 3. Because all the My Little Ponies have a different personality. They're all specialized in different things. It's kind of like mythology, mythology for kindergartners. And so I was really into that. But unfortunately, my unicorn, My Little Pony, I never saw it again. And I cried for days. I was so sad about that. And I never felt like I got any help. I was also really stressed out about doing something wrong. Once I really liked doing creative stuff, but French school was not geared towards creativity. Everything was like so that you could learn to sit down and manage primary school, which was not at all the case in American preschool. I got to experience both worlds, so unfortunately it was not good at French school. Hopefully it got better, and it did get better already 10 years later when my brother started preschool. But still, I like a lot of stuff was regimented, even the stuff that was creative. Um, like we had to dance in a circle, you couldn't like decide how you would dance. You had to do the specific dance, and if you didn't do that dance, then somebody would yell at you. Um, or like we all had to sit and listen to somebody read a story. And if that wasn't what you wanted to do, then tough luck, you had to sit there and listen to the story. And I was really good at repressing and like doing it, but I remember being really frustrated. I would also like overthink things, and like there was a rainbow fish, and the rainbow fish, go check it out. You'll find out that the moral of that story is not really that great, It's basically like, oh, if you're unique, you should be sharing that and not keeping it for yourself. And I remember being upset by that story, but everybody else thought that, look, oh, that's like totally moral. And I was like, no, not at all. So I remember like really thinking deeply about these things, but like nobody else would understand. And then we had to do this artwork, which was basically coloring, and I did not like coloring really. What I liked doing after school was play with Play-Doh, and I would make all of these figurines and stuff. Every day I would play with Play-Doh. I just went through a lot of Play-Doh at that time. And once I had to draw, like we had these squares, this grid, and we had to color, like we had to paint in different colors, but no square could have the same color as the one next to it. And I was overthinking it because I thought there aren't enough paints. in order to do as the teacher has said. Um, but that's because I thought that diagonally the two squares could not touch. So then it became impossible. And I remember it took me ages because I tried so hard to not make these squares touch. Everybody else was like done after a few minutes, but for me it took me a long time. And then the teacher got mad at me for not completing it in time. But like I wanted to do things, I was already perfectionistic then, and yeah, I was so disappointed with myself. Another time I was really disappointed with myself, or like embarrassed, was when I started singing. I started humming right when we were doing like circle time. I started humming Alice in Wonderland's The Flowers song, just out of nowhere, and then everybody started staring at me. And I had no idea I was doing it out loud. Um, so I was like, why is everybody staring at me? And then I realized, like, wow, because these kids, like, they never heard me before, not even hum. So to hear me suddenly hum when I wasn't supposed to, that was like a big deal. Um, I was really into all of these Disney classics. I was also into PBS Kids when I was in the US. French TV for kids at that point was mostly like cartoons, not really deep stuff. But I did like them too. It was just I really loved going to the US just so that I could watch PBS Kids, which is I ended up watching a lot of PBS Kids when my mom was with my grandmother in the hospital. Um, I would so I would watch a lot of that, a lot of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which uh, was really calming and nice to watch. I also liked Zaboomafoo because the animals were good, and I liked Sagwa. I liked all of these kind of nice, these nice children's things. And also the preschool and kindergarten there was awesome. I remember I was there once for Valentine's, and everybody had to give a card, and we had such a nice atmosphere in that classroom that I would actually talk. I would actually become friends with the kids there. So I knew that I could be another person. It's just that the environment was so restrictive in France. I wasn't in the US very long, maybe just like a few months. But my mom like saw me blossom. Like she saw that I was shy and I was anxious, and it wasn't that I was incapable of talking. In fact, I almost like was talking too much, because I wanted to. I had to get stuff out. And I think this teacher, Mrs. Wampler, she encouraged us to read, and um, we weren't really reading yet, but I remember like I learned my letters there, and I thought that it was so cool that her name started with a W. I was like, oh, like W is such a cool letter. Why does my name just start with an I? An I is such a boring letter. I remember having these like thoughts, and and having friends like for real, and being able to, in the US, there's this mentality that's positive. It's an extrovert mentality, but it's positive. It's optimistic. It's be yourself. You can do whatever your dreams. You can follow your dreams. You can be unique. You don't need to fit the mold. Um, especially at that time, I think like the late 90s was really a time where things were looking optimistic. This was before the Twin Towers and all that. So the US was not really the big bad wolf and internationally yet, even though George Bush was, well, it was Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was not that bad in like internationally. Like, once George Bush got elected, it started going downhill. But yeah, I was actually thriving. I was actually doing well. I also got a goldfish. His name was Pooty. He was a great fish. Um, he lived quite a long time, but it was my mom taking care of him mostly. Um, that fish lived a long time, and I went to gymnastics, um, which was great. I started that, um, and and that was also a place where I could be a little bit creative. That I could like run around and have fun with other kids. Um, so I was actually doing quite okay by the time I started grade school, primary school. But then once primary school started, then other problems started coming. And I'll get into that into another video because now this video is getting long. I did have some troubles with French, but I did speak French. It was just that, well, I already knew that I was unique and special because the people that I was meeting were only French. When I went to primary school, I went to a primary school later on that had an English section, so I could meet other people who knew English. But in preschool, I was just in a regular French school. I mean, this was a school that still had two doors that said one for boys and one for girls. I mean, it had been like everybody went through the same door at that time, but it was still very traditional in the way that things were being taught. And I think that contributed to my social anxiety, and it contributed to my annoyance at conformity and the rigidity. But I think that it was also good that I could see that that I wasn't the problem, that the environment was the problem, because I saw how it could be in the US. And it also showed me that sometimes it's okay to be quiet, because it did help me get out of trouble and be able to do my own stuff. I could play with my imaginary friends completely without thinking about other people. I could develop my creativity by, funnily enough, my escapism contributed to my deep inner world because I had time to develop it, and I was an only child, so I was used to being alone. I was used to not having to like not having any restriction on my creativity, and I think that was positive for me. But yes, there were some things that weren't that positive and that affect me to this day, when it comes to my preschool experience. I don't remember a lot of it, but things I do remember are kind of upsetting at times. And it does explain some stuff. I mean, my dad was also pretty rigid, and my mom, I loved my mom, so at least I could get through that. But I think that these things have shaped me, and so I'm not going to erase that. But so that is basically my preschool and kindergarten experience. Tell me what you guys think. I'm sorry for this really long video about talking about myself and my life. I mean, older INFP Insights made another video that showed like she had a completely different childhood than mine, but I think that in some ways it was similar. It was just very different. In some ways there are some similarities, and our past does define certain parts of who we are, at least. And I think that if I want to leave some bits of my past behind, I need to accept them. So that's why I'm making this video. Tell me what you guys think. Have a great day. Bye.